That's brilliant. Thanks, Mary. And just to say thanks for the invite to come along this evening, and just to give you a fairly brief kind of overview of what's coming down the line in terms of Peace Plus. So thanks for the opportunity to do that. And I should say as well, for allowing me to listen to those very interesting presentations there as well. So thanks for that as well.
Glad you got something out of it, yeah.
Yeah, so the first few slides here, I'll try and move through quite quickly. So really, for anybody that doesn't know, I work for the special EU programs body. I'm the program manager for the new Peace Plus programme, and our remit is very much currently around managing the Peace 4 programme, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, and also a programme called Interreg 5A, which is around cross-border collaboration. So just on to the next slide then, Mary, please. Thank you. And I suppose just the current Peace 4 programme, just to give you a little bit of context, we work on areas such as shared education, working in schools, big focus on children and young people, also around kind of community relations in terms of building positive relations, and also around shared space and services. So we have a number of large capital projects throughout Northern Ireland and the border region of Ireland as well. Just the next slide then. And there's just some of the results. And again, I'll circulate, hopefully Mary can circulate this presentation around everybody afterwards, so you can go back and have a look at this. But again, you can just see some of the results from the current Peace 4 programme, which is starting now to move towards its conclusion. Just the next slide then, Mary, please. Thank you. And again, some of the other results around victims and survivors, and also around building positive relations. So the Peace Plus programme is our new programme, and it's about really the focus really is about merging the Peace programme and also the Interreg programme. So they're both coming together now for the next number of years as one single programme. And the overall objective of the programme is to build peace and prosperity. So it's really about obviously looking and focusing still on what the Peace 4 programme has done in terms of promoting good relations at a local level and also at a regional level between our communities, and also around prosperity, so around the economic context, and also around things like climate change, sustainable development, and biodiversity, and things like that. So just the next slide then, Mary. So many of you might have been engaged with us a couple of years now. Some of this, we would have had a big consultation exercise just pre-COVID, and then also last year. And I'm sure many of you were engaged in that process as we developed the programme. And that slide just really shows just how the new programme has been developed, and the various inputs, from the consultations, from the likes of yourselves in terms of community groups and the community and voluntary sector, and also other citizens throughout Northern Ireland and the border counties of Ireland. Also as well, we're obviously having to develop, and we did develop the programme in line with things like the programme for government in Northern Ireland and Ireland, and also around departmental policy priorities, and also around the European context as well, because what we obviously are, the Peace Plus programme is an EU programme and works within the framework that the European Commission set. So just the next slide then, Mary, please. And again, that just touches on just the amount of engagement we had over the last number of years. And indeed, the statutory consultation that we had last year, we received over 400 responses from right across the programme area. And there was a lot of support for, I think, the thematic areas that we're focused in on, and also some of the administrative proposals that we have around how we can make the programme more easier to access, which I'm sure would be a concern for many of the people here today. So just the next slide then, Mary, please. So, and apologies in advance, because you probably can't make this out too well. I was trying to put something into this slide from another document, but again, it's just a useful overview of the themes and the investment areas that the programme will focus in on. So you can see across the top there, we've got 6 themes that the programme will focus on. So we've got theme 1 around building peaceful and thriving communities, theme 2, which is around economic regeneration, theme 3, which is around empowering and investing in our young people, and then theme 4, which is around healthy and inclusive communities, and theme 5, which is around sustainable development, around climate change mitigation, and all those big issues that I think all of our communities are dealing with at the moment. And theme 6 is around building and embedding partnership and collaboration between communities, and also on a north-south basis as well. So the bottom bit there, where you see those investment areas, Mary, if you just go back that slide for a second there, you can see the investment areas at the bottom there. And there are 21 separate investment areas across these themes. And it's important just to point that out, because not all of these investment areas may be of interest to you, but a lot of them will be. And it's important just to begin to familiarize yourself with some of them, because each of those separate investment areas will have a separate call for applications. So we will invite over the next 18 months applications forward from a range of groups and organizations who fit with the investment area. We'll invite them forward to submit an application to us. So each of those investment areas, there's a lot more information that you can find on those on our website, and I'll just refer you to some of that just when I get to the end of the presentation. So the next slide then, Mary. So the focus of PEACEPLUS really, you can see there, is on supporting, developing, enabling and engaging communities. It's about the development of local action plans by local authorities. And again, I'll just say a little bit more about that in a moment, because it's important, I think, even at this stage, to begin to engage with your local authority. So Fermanagh and Omagh Council, because there's going to be a big programme of activity and work to design those localised peace action plans, and we'll be providing money to each of those local authorities to do that over the next number of months. So it's about meaningful engagement as well, and looking at innovative approaches to the delivery of new services, particularly in rural communities. It's about the inclusion of civil society at every level, and it's also about leaving a real and lasting impact on those that have been most affected, really, obviously from the issues pertaining to the conflict and the issues around that, but also around the other issues that have emerged in the last number of years. You know, particularly the programme is also designed to be a response around COVID and some of the issues that have arisen around that. So, and it's about looking at marginalised communities and trying to ensure that we engage with projects and we fund projects that are inclusive. And I suppose the other thing I would say as well is this time round, we have, separate to those local authority action plans, we also have what we call a small scale project fund. So these are what would be described as small projects in the context of our programme. So projects that are below 100,000 euros in terms of their total fund allocation. So it could be projects up to, you know, tens of thousands or right up to that 100,000 mark. And hopefully that will assist those smaller community groups to access and be able to participate in the programme. Mary, just the next slide then, if you can. Thanks very much. And just some other areas there, just, you know, encouraging things like the social economy and social entrepreneurship and social innovation, also building capacity in terms of community leadership, about regeneration, particularly in rural and border communities, and you know, around our town centres and villages as well. So there's a whole range of things the programme really wants to focus in on, and that's why we've ended up with that range of different investment areas and themes. And there is quite a lot in there, but it's really, we want to make sure that the programme is able to cover and provide focus to some of these big challenges that the likes of yourselves are experiencing and want to engage and receive funding for. So next slide then, Mary, and I just want to just again very briefly just touch on a couple of areas that will be of interest to you, and of course there will be others across, as I said, across these investment areas, but just to focus in on a little in the time that I've got. So as I mentioned, one of the investment areas we're providing funding for is around co-designed local community action plans. So each local authority will have to produce an action plan, very much in partnership and co-designed with communities. So that's a process that will commence shortly. And over the course of the next number of months, local authorities will be engaging, with communities right throughout each of their local authority areas to make sure that there's that engagement and that it's built from the bottom in terms of the local authority action plans. And there's a number of areas you see on the right-hand side of the slide there that we want those action plans to focus on. So we want a focus on local community regeneration and transformation, around thriving and peaceful communities, and also around projects and initiatives that build respect for all cultural identities. So that's obviously a big area. And again, I would say, make sure that you're engaged in that process and that you're aware of what's coming down the line within your own local authority area. The next slide then, Mary, please. So as I said, around small scale projects, these are projects that will be below 100,000. So this is separate to what I've talked about there in terms of the local authority action plans. And it's about empowering communities, it's about embedding peace through these small grants. So you can see, what we want to see there is, an enabling really of a bottom-up approach. So really looking at organisations to receive this funding that are working at a grassroots level, and that they can make a really direct contribution to peace and reconciliation. So the way we're going to design this, and this is still something that we're working on, is that the administrative process around how you would apply, and also around how, if you were successful through the small grant program, then that we want to make it administratively easy for community groups and organisations to really deliver a project. So there are measures that we're looking and we're responding to, obviously, the consultation response in last year to try and make this as simple and as easy as possible. So again, that's an area I think, again, very much to follow as things develop over the course of the next number of months. Mary, just the next slide then, please. Oh, is Mary there?
Is that not the next slide?
Oh, sorry, Mary. That is it. Sorry, apologies. So, again, continuing on in terms of, there's another area around small grants as well, around north-south cooperation. So north-south collaboration between community groups and organisations right across society. So again, investment area 6.2 is about maintaining and forging relationships on that cross-border basis. So not just focus on that real peace and reconciliation, that core kind of work around good relations, but a bit broader than that, around a whole range of issues and challenges that you might be experiencing, but that you could benefit from collaborating with partners or other community groups on a north-south basis. So again, it's just important to point that out as well. Just the next slide then, Mary, please. Thank you. And then just to touch on other areas. So there's an investment area on rural regeneration and social inclusion. And again, things like community development resources, family support hubs. Mentioned the social economy, I think will be an area of focus there. Green infrastructure, so things like greenways and things like that can be real benefits in terms of tourism, and also around things like social farming. And we're asking for people to think about projects and that in those sorts of areas, but before the call opens. So this is a call be coming probably later this year, but it's right across the region, but certainly for your own area, there's opportunities there to develop projects which benefit yourselves in rural areas and towns, and villages. So just the next slide then, I'm just coming to the end now. So just in terms of next steps, we've submitted the programme to the European Commission for approval, and we're hoping to be able to really formally launch the first calls on the programme really over the course of the next couple of months. There's a number of processes that we need to go through. Obviously, we need that approval formally from the European Commission, and we're expecting that between the next 6 to 8 weeks. As soon as we receive that, then we'll proceed really to start to launch the programme. And we're hoping really probably by June that we'll be in a position to do that. So calls will open really from then. Obviously, we won't open all 21 investment areas at once, so it will be, there'll be a number of calls that will open first, but really probably towards the end of this year and the next year is when the majority of calls really will start to be opened, and that you'll be able to engage in that process. We will be looking to really look at, if you are developing a project, we want to provide support around that, in terms of your capacity to do that. And there will be initiatives that we put in place that help manage this. On the small scale projects that I mentioned, we're looking probably early 2023 for those calls to launch, and there'll probably be a number of those launch over the course of the programme period. So just the next slide then, Mary. And this will be my last slide. Really, what should you do at this stage? I think, as I mentioned, really do engage with your local authority on their plans around the co-design process for the local action plans. They will be publishing information, I think, around that in the months ahead. And please do engage in that. Join our mailing list. Do make sure that you're kept up to date with developments under our programme. We still find the easiest way to connect with people at this stage is through our mailing list to get information to people quickly. So PEACEPLUS@SEUPB.eu. If you send an email to that, then we'll add you to the mailing list and get your consent to do that. On our website, then if you go to SEUPB.eu/PEACEPLUS, there's a dedicated page on PEACEPLUS, and there's a programme overview document there. And there's a lot of good information in there that you can read through. It's almost a citizen summary that we've provided. So you can go on, and there's one-page summaries of most of those investment areas, and you can get a bit more information on that. So it's really thinking about where you best fit in that context, and really start to think, if you're thinking about those small scale projects or even something bigger, it's starting to think how you develop your project and how you build partnerships, and who do we need to work with. And certainly we're open to continue to engage, and certainly get in contact with me if there's any other kind of specific questions beyond today. So I'll just finish there. There's a couple of other slides there I'll not really go through, but there's, as I said, Mary's more than welcome to circulate the presentation. There's just a couple of slides there on a thing called the Peace Learning Platform, that, if you're interested in finding out information on some of our the projects that we have funded down the years and up to Peace 4, then there's a lot of information there that you can go on and have a look at. So we'll just finish there, and certainly happy to take any questions, Mary, if anybody has any. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Declan. A whistle-stop tour of PEACEPLUS, and some very interesting findings there. Do we have any questions from the floor?
I was just wondering, while I appreciate that it's very important to educate our young people, and they probably don't have any memories of conflict or anything else, only what their parents or grandparents have told them. Do you do any work with the elderly who have lived through all this?
Absolutely, and I mean, I suppose, look, that really it's up to I suppose we set the kind of context for the programme, and really we invite applications forward. So there's a number of areas of the programme there that projects could be developed where elderly people and people with experiences of the troubles and the challenges of that people went through and experienced there. There's opportunities there really to get involved in projects that can be submitted to us then, to tell stories, and to help young people even to learn from the experiences that older people maybe had during that period of time. So there's a lot of projects that we've funded down the years, around storytelling and things like that, and that's something that we would like to see continue into PEACEPLUS as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Can I just ask, Declan, you're saying there if there's 21 investment areas, so roughly how many of those investment areas would be accessible to people who are on the call tonight, who are mainly like smaller groups? So rather than councils or larger organisations, are there many of them that are accessible to be to groups that are on the call tonight?
Yeah, no, I think probably the most accessible areas, and this is why we've done it this time around, is around those two investment areas that I referred to. So the investment area on empowering communities, and I had a slide up there on that, but around smaller scale projects. So that has absolutely been one of the reasons why we didn't necessarily fund projects to that scale under the last two programme periods. But I think in response to what we were hearing, particularly when we were out doing consultations, that the accessibility of from community groups in terms of being able to participate and be funded under the programme, I think that's very much in response to some of that feedback that we received. So that investment area in terms of empowering communities is really focused on the likes of some of the people that will be here today in terms of those community groups, and it can be focused. Yes, there's a piece. It has to be around good relations and peace and reconciliation, but as ultimately the outcome from the project. But it can involve sports clubs. It can involve a whole range of different community and voluntary sector organisations engaging around activities with people in their community. So I think there's absolutely opportunities there. There's also opportunities under the investment area 6.2 as well, which is on that north-south kind of dimension. And again, that can be around a whole range of activity and areas that might be challenges for yourselves. So those two areas probably specifically I would point out. But there is other areas as well. I mean, ultimately this programme will. We absolutely, when we're assessing projects, we want to ensure that this programme is delivering for people on the ground, and it's delivering for how So, any project coming through, we'll very much be driving at that. If it is from a bigger organisation, how have you engaged with communities? How have you made sure that this is actually delivering impact? So I think those two specific areas I would point out, and I would ask I think groups around the table today, I think go and have a look at those in particular. But there's other areas as well right across the board, I think, that will be of interest.
Declan,
thank you.
Just two questions that are in the chat function there. One from Ellen Marie. Will, just complimenting you, but will the presentation be shared? Yes,
we'll be doing that. Yeah, we'll be doing that.
And secondly, from Omagh Futsal, is it multi-year funding, or how long can projects last?
So it can be multi-year funding, in the sense that it can be a project that runs for 2-3 years. For some of those smaller projects, I think below the 100,000 mark, it depends really what you're coming forward and what you want to do. There will be flexibility there, I think, around the time frame. It could be up to a year, it could be less than that, or it could be longer. I think, generally speaking, most of our projects would be around 3 years. But for the smaller projects, I think the flexibility would be there for organisations to come forward and really make the case around what do you need in terms of the length of the project period, and that will be assessed on on the merits of the application that comes forward. Okay.
Kathy?
Kathy has a question.
Hello. Declan, that was brilliant. Thanks so much. I learned a lot and it was a really good presentation. Just bear with me while I figure out how to word this question, because there's a wee bit to it. You mentioned a few things about when applying for such funding, it needs to be community and council working together and collaborating. And you also mentioned about making the administrative process easier. What sort of steps are being taken there? Because, in this council area, there have been past events where democratic processes aren't followed internally and voices are silenced. And that's really hard for communities then to have an equal voice. Just wondering if you've got any comment around that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose just to take the point around the administrative side of things, maybe first, Kathy, on the administrative side of things, so on those smaller grants below 100,000, what we'll be seeking to do there is, rather than groups when they're successful, if you're successful in terms of a plan, we would pay out lump sum payments. So essentially, you wouldn't have to be kind of claiming at different periods, you know, throughout the lifetime of a project over the course of 12 months or 3 years or whatever else it might be. You know, so it would be, you know, trying to make things easier in terms of payments that are made, you know, so that it cuts down on, you know, people coming out and verifying information and all of that sort of stuff. So trying to simplify that, and we're still working on that in the background. So still more information that we'll need to supply on that, you know, later this year ahead of the calls opening. So things like that. I think also at the application stage as well, you know, we'll be trying to have things much more streamlined for those smaller projects, you know, to make sure that, you know, we only ask for the information that we really need to be able to assess your project and be able to make a decision on your project, to try and keep things as simple as possible really at that stage as well. And of course, we'd also try, as part of that, when you're developing projects as well, we want to offer support at that stage as well. So around, you know, the capacity of groups to be able to, you know what it is that they, the types of things that we're looking for in terms of the applications, and making sure that people are well set when, you know, when calls open, so you can apply effectively. So things like that, definitely on the administrative side, we're working on to make things as simple as possible. I suppose that, you know, on the council side of things, you know, that's why you know, the approach that we're mandating councils to take this time is around this co-design process with local communities. And indeed, councils at the moment are right across the programme area are looking at their governance kind of structures for how decisions will be taken. And we have people working with councils at the minute on that. So obviously in terms of learning lessons from the current programmes, and also from our perspective, we want to make sure that this programme and the funds that are provided for the local action plans are delivering impact on the groups and organisations being involved in that process. So, so look, I mean, all I can really say on that one is that's something that is an ongoing process, really. And you know, we're very much wanting to ensure that you know, communities are actively involved, and community groups and organisations feel part of this process. So you know, that is something, you know, when we come to assess those action plans, you know, as the funding body, you know, things we'll be looking for is, you know, how have you engaged and how have you got people involved from communities, you know, in that co-design process, and how that is maintained then throughout the course of any local action plan project. So there's a range of things there, I think, that, you know, you'll see coming down the line, and, you know, things that we're very conscious of and we're working on in the background as well.
Tom, do you want to come in there?
Yes, Chairman. Declan, would PEACEPLUS look favourably on restarting a previous cross-border partnership we had, but has been dormant now for 9 years?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I'm saying. I think you know, that investment area 6.2 is very much designed to try and support you know, the cross-border activity between community groups and organisations. So so obviously, I think you know, there has been in the past a very strong structures there on a north-south basis, you know, particularly in the border regions such as yourselves. So it's really, you know, kind of in response to that we want to provide money, you know, and funding for organisations really to maybe in some cases re-establish some of that contact that maybe has been lost, you know, over the last number of years, and to make sure that those partnerships and the collaboration on a north-south basis is really really built up again and is there and made stronger, I suppose, you know, for the benefit of people and communities on both sides of the border.
And it's open this year sometime?
Probably on that one, I would really, I think, being honest with you, it's probably early next year. So I think, though there's still a bit of work around the administrative side of things on those small projects, you know, to make this as simple as possible for the likes of yourselves and others. So there's a bit of work to do on that, you know, throughout the remainder of this year. And I think we're really looking at, you know, January, February, probably before the calls begin to open on that. But even in advance of that, you know, there'll be information that'll be going out, as I said, around, you know, how we can start to support in terms of the capacity building side, you know, around preparing groups and organisations for that call opening. So you will see stuff this year on that, and there will be support provided. But the actual formal opening of the call, I think, is probably next January, February before that will actually happen.
Thanks, Declan, and thanks to Omagh Forum. Thank you.
Leo, do you want to ask a question there?
Thank you very much, Declan, for your presentation there. Now, it was very, very informative indeed. I just have one thing that jumped into my mind there. Match funding, would that be a feature of anything going forward at all, or how would that?
Well, I'm pleased to report with our programme, it's 100% funded. So any project that comes through to us and it's funded to 100%. So there's no match funding that needs to be brought to the table, you know, by any group or organisation. So you know, you make your application and for the amount that you need, and within the confines of the call, and you know, that's what you're awarded if you're successful. So so match funding isn't something that you know, would be a concern, you know, in terms of developing projects or anything like that.
Good, thank you very much. So if we got into your mailing list or whatever, we'll be able to ask a few more questions on that as well too, and see what's going. I'm living down in Billig here, so I have a couple of interests outside in regard to, I'm involved with the Billig Men's Shed and also Billig Development and Heritage. So we have a couple of different angles, and you mentioned about 100,000 we would take the arm off you even if you went back well on a couple of decimal points there, to tell you the truth, you know, on that 100,000. But you'll be hearing from us, Declan, and thank you very much.
That's no problem at all. No problem.
The other thing, Declan, is will you have, for the application, you talked about being called forward. Is there a written application and then like a verbal, you know, a face-to-face interview to talk about your project?
Yeah, no, it would just be a written application. You know, so it would be a written application, but there would be, you know, as I said, there could be engagement in advance of that, you know, where, you know, you can talk to people and get a bit of support around, you know, the idea that you have. And, you know, we're looking at that at the minute in terms of who can do that, you know, basically on our behalf, you know, in terms of working with like yourselves and others. So so there will be that support kind of process before you actually get to the stage of actually having to write your application and submitting that to us. But the actual, you know, when you get to the application stage, you know, it's a written application that's submitted, and then, you know, that's assessed on the basis of what you've submitted.
Okay, thank you.
Declan, a question, just you may have said it, but I didn't pick up on it. A lot of grants are capital, a lot of revenue. Is there any kind of breakdown there, or, you know, just?
Yeah, so we probably haven't defined that absolutely at the minute, and that's something that you probably have to wait and see when, you know, calls are published and some of the supports there. But what I can say is there can certainly be capital elements. You know, we've got big capital projects, you know, really kind of significantly sized ones running in, you know, the 10, 12, 13 million, you know, on the current programme, and we'll see that continuing into the next programme period. But even at that very the smaller level in terms of projects, you know, there can be a capital dimension to that. So again, you know, that'll be something that we'll publish some further information on that when we can, you know, probably around, you know, setting some parameters around that. But certainly, you know, you can think in those terms around, you know, well, what would it be, you know, in terms of what you're thinking, and start to even think about, you know, what capital projects potentially would you want to be looking to us to fund, you know, even at this stage. So yeah, there's no real split there at the minute, but you know, certainly I think that later this year, before we go out with those small scale projects, you know, we probably will define that a bit more in terms of you know, what it is, our expectations around that in terms of what's coming forward.
Yeah. Anybody else?
I have another question. Sorry to be.
No problem, Antoinette.
But and this is going to show my stupidity. But I'm not au fait in all the lingo that's going on. But what is social farming?
Yeah, so social farming, like apologies, probably not. Someone else could probably answer this a lot better than me that's involved in it. But social farming, I think, is really a kind of diversification in terms of there'll be farms in some areas, even in Northern Ireland and border counties, that would deliver some services on behalf of health and social care service. So for example, you know, even if there's people struggling with mental health and things like that, that you know, that they would come onto the farm and there's things and activities that they can get involved in. So it's a concept that's there. I think you know, internationally it's something that has worked quite well in other countries. You know, as a way of leaving you know, or helping to deliver kind of more healthy and inclusive kind of communities. So it's kind of around that sort of thing, and it's something that's in the program, and I think came across you know, as something that we felt potentially had room for projects to come forward on that. There's been projects that we have funded in the past around social farming under our Interreg program. So yeah, I mean, you know, if you go on I think if Mary circulates the presentation around, I sort of mentioned at the end there that there's a learning platform that we have, and there's a link there in the presentation for it. If you go onto that website and search for social farming, you'll see some of the projects maybe that have been funded in the past around that. Might give you a little bit of a flavour and an idea, better than what I can say maybe. But that's certainly what it is. It's around kind of the delivery of kind of some services on behalf of the health service, you know, around that.
Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thank you. There's been a lot of questions there. Have we any closing questions for Declan? Can we share? Well, I suppose in the presentation there's some. I don't know if there's an email address to be able to contact SEUPB in it, or is that possible for further queries?
Absolutely. So I think one of the last slides there it mentioned the PEACEPLUS@seupb.eu. So anything. I mean, if just it's probably the easiest way to get in contact with us, to be honest, rather than me giving you my email address as well. I mean, if you send anything in that, you can get out of the mailing list first and foremost. But if you have other questions, usually they'll come through to me anyway. So that the team will work on it. So
no worries.
I'll come back to you on any.
Thank you. Thanks a million. Listen, I want to just take this opportunity. We'll close it up now because we're at 9:15 and we didn't think that the meeting would go on that long.